He delivered a speech to the Russian people where he referred to the American global empire as the empire of lies. People with blue check marks on Twitter flipped out about it, and it's easy to understand why. It's because it's entirely true. Our ruling elites really have created an empire of lies. Just think back. Over the past 20 years, we were pushed into the Iraq war by claims of fighting weapons of mass destruction and allegations that Saddam Hussein was linked directly with al-Qaeda. Spoiler alert, the WMDs didn't exist at all. Oh, and those al-Qaeda ties, those were all lies too. So after we invaded Iraq, they were forced to change the whole goal of the invasion to spreading democracy. But of course, we didn't really do any of that either. We just spent a decade building up a crappy Iranian puppet state. So then the same people who sold us the Iraq war spent 20 years selling us the war in Afghanistan. We spent trillions of dollars there, once again, to fight terror. Oh, and of course, build democracy. But again, we weren't doing either. We were just dumping money there so that defense contractors, NGOs, and Afghan collaborators could get rich, filthy rich. The entire time, they lied about making progress while every single day the Taliban conquered more and more of the country. And the reason the Taliban made so much progress is that the locals actually preferred them because our own government was so disgustingly corrupt. Under our leadership, if that's what you want to call it, the Afghan government became famous for settling scores and demanding bribes and pushing gender ideology and looking the other way while warlords raped little boys. Turns out the Afghan people would rather have the Taliban than any of that. But the war went on anyways for 20 years, even though General Milley and other thugs and frauds said that we were building up the Afghan army into a real force. Whoops, it turns out that was most likely a lie too. Most of these soldiers only existed on paper, as far as we can tell. A lot of them just signed up for some quick cash and a free gun and then bailed. They ran off to become bandits themselves or join the Taliban. So the moment we stepped away, of course, the whole thing collapsed. But as I'm sure that you're aware, the lies aren't just limited to Iraq or Afghanistan. Of course, in 2011, they lied us right into Libya, telling us that we were overthrowing Gaddafi to bring about, guess what? Democracy. Instead of bringing about democracy, we brought about civil war and poverty and even slavery. Yeah, there have been literal slave markets in Libya since our intervention. Oh, and of course, ever since Gaddafi fell, millions of migrants have also poured into Europe across the Mediterranean. But of course, the empire of lies doesn't just lie about wars. For the past 2 years, it was one lie after another about COVID-19. They've lied about how severe it is, about masks, about China, hospitalizations, preventions, treatments, vaccines, and then when their lies get exposed, they just lie about their old lies. Our leaders lied about Donald Trump being a Russian asset. They lied about having a P-tape. When they were caught spying on the Trump campaign, they lied about that. They lied about Burisma. They lied about Hunter Biden. They lied about a dossier so that they could justify a sham impeachment. And don't forget about the summer of 2020 when hundreds of American cities were burning to the ground as $12 billion in damage was being inflicted. People were getting raped and killed. Occupied police precincts were being set afire, and they lied and presented George Floyd as some sort of a saint and said that Derek Chauvin murdered him. When in reality, George Floyd was nothing more than a career criminal, violent thug who died of a fentanyl overdose. Then they lied and called the riots after his death mostly peaceful protests. They lied and told us that Jussie Smollett was a victim of a hate crime. They lied and told us that Kyle Rittenhouse was a white supremacist and a murderer when he defended himself from 3 Antifa thugs, one of which loved to rape little kids. Our elites have been lying about the basic nature of reality. They tell us that a man can mutilate his genitals and put on lipstick and suddenly he's a woman. And you're supposed to believe that. This entire world that we're living in is really the empire of lies. Without telling more lies every day, it would just collapse completely. So it should be no surprise to you. I know that it's no surprise to us at all that the war in Ukraine they're trying to sell the public has required nonstop lying. They've lied about the causes of the war. It's absolutely obvious that our leaders triggered this by trying to expand NATO into Ukraine and ignoring 20 years of warnings from Russia that this was unacceptable. But instead, they want you to believe that Putin just woke up one day and invaded Ukraine to be evil. It's all a lie. It's a joke. News outlets have actually lied about the actual events of the war. They've made up ridiculous fables like the ghost of Kyiv. They've turned President Zelensky into some kind of a superhero while covering up his real behavior, which included banning opposition parties and forcibly taking control of the entire media. They're accusing Russia of genocide when actually it's obvious that Russia has tried to avoid civilian casualties, and that's a major reason the war is taking longer than originally expected. Lara Logan is a TV and radio journalist and a longtime war correspondent. She worked with CBS News for 16 years. She covered warfare and rioting in Baghdad and Egypt and Afghanistan. In 2020, she got her own show on Fox Nation, but then Fox News ghosted her for justifiably comparing Tony Fauci with Nazi Dr. Joseph Mengele. Last week, she was invited onto Real America's Voice, and she was asked about reports from the Daily Mail that the Russian army was running out of bullets. In response, Lara revealed the real truth, that the story was completely ridiculous, another lie, and that the war in Ukraine has arguably prompted more lies on a larger scale than any news event in recent history. It may have even caused more lies even than COVID. Well, on the Stu Peters Show, we live for finding the truth, for exposing corruption and revealing lies. So naturally, we were happy to have sat down with Lara Logan. We promised never to ghost her for being too blunt or politically incorrect in saying the truth. We sat down with her for nearly an hour earlier today. Here's some of what she said.
There are actual apartment buildings that are surrounded by the Ukrainian flag. I mean, everywhere you drive across LA, I can just tell you that that's what you call the theater of the absolute ridiculous. When in our lifetimes did anybody ever see the cheering that is going on here with any kind of war? I mean, that gets my BS meter just, going absolutely off the charts, because that's not how things normally happen. And what you have here is, whether you like Putin or don't like him, whether he's a good guy or he's a bad guy, Putin is not willing to be part of whatever, global governing structure is coming our way. He's one man who's standing between us and the people who want to see a new world order. And you don't have to dig very deep to find out that Ukraine has a very dark history, and it's directly involved in much of what has gone on in the United States. You talk about, all the lies. Well, Ukraine has been at the center of many of the biggest and most damaging lies, and it has an extraordinary role to play in all of this. And Vladimir Putin has been very calculating. He's been very careful. He's been, as you would expect from someone who has said for 15 years he would not tolerate NATO expansion, who has made it very clear that he is not part of whatever that they've got going on right now in the bioweapons labs that Hunter Biden's, partners and firms are connected to. He's the man standing between us and, this new world order. And they want to say that we're conspiracy theorists if we talk about it. But at the World Economic Forum, they can talk about it. At the UN, they can talk about it. They can institute a global corporate, a tax. They can institute a global minimum wage, suggest that for a universal basic minimum wage. They can talk about a universal health passport, right? A digital one. But if anyone else talks about it, then we're conspiracy theorists and we're pushed to the fringes of alt-right lunacy. And I'm just tired of it. I'm tired of it. I don't care if those people who want to read the New York Times and read the Washington Post and believe the nonsense. I just, I don't have time for that anymore. I'm talking to the people who are listening and want to hear what's true and what's not true. You know what's